All right, we're back, and we're going to shift over to humanism now. So, Carl Rogers is our big humanist. We talked about Maslow in previous videos. He was Carl Rogers. Um, they were at the same time, and then they really challenged each other to think about things in certain ways. Carl Rogers is the one who really introduced the concept of self-esteem. He was the first one to really use that term, and he meant it as autonomy and self-determination, which might not be what your operational definition of self esteem is, right? He meant people who have high self esteem would have a sense of autonomy, or what you might have heard referred to as agency, that they determine for themselves their own outcomes. So, all right. Now, if you want to measure your self esteem sort of through the lens of Rogers, you can go to page 171 and you'll find a short form of the contingencies of self worth scale. I also found the longer version for you in case you're really into it. It is longer, so it does take longer, but you can at least get a snapshot of yourself by using the scale that's in the book. So, what Rogers thought determined your self esteem was sort of the message that you got growing up about whether you were meeting other people's expectations or your own expectations. So he said that people who have what he called congruence tended to have higher self esteem. And that is when they were growing up, they experienced unconditional positive regard. Now, if they didn't experience that in childhood, maybe they could experience it as an adult and develop congruence as an adult. But he's saying, for the average person, the way that we end up in whatever degree of self-esteem we have now is a result of what kind of congruence we have developed over our growing up years. So, people who experience unconditional positive regard tend to be healthier and are free to self actualize. They are free to become their best selves, to work on becoming more and not be bogged down. Like I said, he and Maslow talked a lot. And so Maslow refers to it as self actualization. Rogers calls it free to self actualize, whatever, little semantic discrepancy. But basically, they both agree that trying to become your best self is beyond the sort of everyday things that you might be bound up in. And so, if we feel good enough about ourselves, we're not going to be bound up with those lower level things as much, and we can pursue our becoming our best selves. On the flip side, a person can develop incongruence if they experience conditions of worth growing up. So, let's spend a moment talking about what this conditions of worth and unconditional positive regard really is. So, unconditional positive regard does not mean what a lot of people think it means. I've had very heated discussions with students in my personality theory class who think they know their Rogers. I've read Rogers in the original, and he did not say what a lot of people think he said. Unconditional positive regard does not mean that you love everything that a person does, and therefore you just accept every single thing that they do, that everything they do is fine. That is not unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard is the message that no matter what, you are a lovable and valuable person. That no matter what, I will always regard you as a lovable and valuable person. I may 100% hate what you just did. I might dislike what you just did. I might not want to see you for a while because of what you just did. But that does not mean that I'm going to reject you and have nothing to do with you. It means I'm going to judge the behavior and maybe even dole out consequences if I'm in a position to do that. Like if I'm your parent and you've done a behavior I don't like, I'm going to deal with the behavior. I'm going to maybe exact some kind of discipline technique, maybe time out or make you work back for the thing that you broke or whatever discipline technique I'm going to use. I'm going to give you feedback about the behavior. but I'm ultimately going to give the message that you are a lovable person. It's the behavior that needs to change, not you as a person. You broke the vase, so now you have to earn money to replace the vase. That's discipline, and it's separate from the person being lovable or valuable. Um, there are discipline techniques that can give the child or the learner the impression that the behavior is so bad that you actually are not lovable or that I don't love you right now. That would be placing a condition of worth. If you are good and if you do the things you're supposed to, then I love you. That's a condition of worth. Unconditional positive regard, I will always love you and care about you. I will always think you are lovable. I will always say that you're valuable, even as I may not appreciate what you've done, right? So there's this separation between deed and person in Roger's model, that the deeds may be good or bad, but the person is fundamentally lovable. You may have seen movies or news accounts of very bad people who have done very bad things. And a lot of times it'll be like religious figures. I can't remember the name of this movie that I'm thinking of where this nun was visiting people who were on death row. And people really gave the nun a hard time because why are you comforting these murderers who have been sentenced to death? Why are you giving them comfort in their last months? And she was doing it through the lens of her religiosity, but she was basically saying what Rogers says, that the person is still a valuable person even as their behaviors are abhorrent. And she was able to separate. I'm not sure I could do that. I've had students who misunderstood Rogers, so we're having like sort of back and forth conversations, and they get the impression that that I'm arguing from my own beliefs or something, which I'm not. I'm just telling you what Roger said. And so they'd ask me things like, well, if your son murdered somebody, would you still love him? And it's like, probably, I don't know. I would like to not ever have to know the answer to that question. Probably I'd still love him because I'd remember him as a baby and I'd remember him as a small child and maybe carry some guilt, like, did I make him into a murderer? Like those kinds of things anyway. And then, but do I love that he murdered somebody? No, I don't love that he murdered somebody. So I don't, like, how am I supposed to put myself into that hypothetical anyway? I don't even understand how I could imagine that. How can you imagine that? Um, I read a really good book by the mother of one of the Columbine shooters, and she did such a good job of sort of explaining what it's like to be in the mother's position um, with this heinous act that was committed by her son. And, you know, even then, I've read it and I'm like, I don't know. Like, would I go see him in prison? I don't know. I don't know. Um, and that's not the point. It's the point on unconditional positive regard from Roger's perspective is that it's something that we need to experience when we're little. And so when my son was little, he had not murdered anybody. I just want to clarify that. And so he was absolutely deserving of unconditional positive regard from his parents. That he's a lovable kid, even as we had to sometimes put him in timeout. That he was a lovable kid, even if I had to take his toys away. These kinds of things, right? So to make sure that the child grows up with this sense of unconditional positive regard, even as they're being disciplined, they need to be also provided evidence that they are lovable and valued, and that the reason why they maybe had to experience a punishment right now is because we're helping to guide you into your best self. That's the point. It's not this hypothetical that my adult child murdered someone, which knock on wood, but so far it still hasn't happened. So yay. But what, right? It's not a personal thing. It's not my attitude. This is what Roger said. So you might have had experiences where conditions of worth were placed on you, and hopefully it was a temporary thing. Hopefully it was like a one shot deal or something like that. But this sense that you are more loved because you got good grades, or that you were more loved because you scored a point, or something like that. Speaking of that same son, I think he got the incorrect impression that we were more proud of him if he won his wrestling match than if he didn't. We were not more proud of him either way. We were like so proud of him for getting out there and doing it. If he won, I knew he was happy, so I'd be cheering, but it wasn't because I was like, oh, finally, my big fat loser has finally won it. Like, nothing like that. Nothing like that was part of it, but he may have internalized that, right? And that's the thing, is that as a child, it's what we got. Remember that Rogers is a humanist, and so he believes that our perspective is what actually matters. It doesn't matter what really happened or objectively happened or something. It's what we got from it. And so, if we experience a sense that we were more lovable, if that helps to foster incongruence inside of us, and that may be why, even though we had awesome parents, if we did, we might still not have the perfect self esteem. We may still have self doubts. It may be that our parents gave us an occasional sense of conditions of worth. It could be that other adults did that, where other adults gave us the message that, we were more valuable, we got to be included on the team, or something like that, if we behaved in the way that they wanted us. Um, so probably all of us have had conditions of worth placed on us, and that's why none of us has perfectly high self-esteem. I'm not sure we want to have perfectly high self-esteem, because that can be quite harmful. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking and let you watch this self-worth video that was produced for us, and for an ad campaign, and then we'll come back on the other side and talk a little bit about that.